I'm Talvin Singh. I'm a percussionist, producer and composer. And right now we're here at Utopia Studios in Bentwaters Park, which is in Suffolk, East Anglia. Been in Suffolk for 3 years now. I did a few performances at Alborough Music, and they were kind of curated performances with pretty much film. I was doing live performance, kind of a live score to some really amazing films. One film which is made by a wonderful filmmaker called Ben Rivers. He had spent time in Scotland kind of following a kind of, a sadhu type of person who decided to live his life in complete solitude, and he followed him without kind of simple resources like electricity and petrol and food possibly, and he followed him for 2 years with a kind of pneumatic camera, and he made this beautiful film. And so they had kind of asked me to do a live music score to this movie. So I performed that in Alborough a few times, and then I got to know the past ex-director, Jonathan Ricci, and then slowly kind of, spent long weekends in Suffolk and kind of realized that this is a great place to live, and it's a wonderful place to be creative. It's almost super silent at times, which makes my hearing even more sensitive to music making, music practice, music composition, and production. I began playing percussion, pots and pans, and my mum's kitchen while she was cooking aromatic Indian food. And then that slowly kind of guided me to playing the tabla, which is the Indian percussion instrument. I spent many hours as a kid practicing, imitating master musicians, percussionists, which I had heard on vinyl. So I started collecting records at the age of 12, 13. My father was an electronic engineer, and so he worked with video and TV and hi-fi. And so I grew up pretty much with, capacitors and ICs and circuit boards in my home and in the cellar and everywhere. And that inspired me to kind of get closer to listening to music via hi-fi systems, turntables, started collecting records, used to go to Southall. From the age of 13, I started going to Southall, which was completely the other end of London for me, traveling from East London to West London, buying records on a Saturday, pretty much Indian classical records or whatever I could get hold of, from early Bollywood 70s, early 80s Bollywood disco to Indian classical music, which was always been the most closest to me. And then discovering so many different styles of music coming from a part of the world which I was always fascinated about, especially the recording industry of India always fascinated me, because I couldn't understand why they were kind of doing things in terms of music making and production in a complete different way from what I have heard in the UK, because simultaneously to that I was buying electro records with my friends. So I was buying electro, hip-hop, early Africa Bambaataa records. And then slowly, we started kind of breakdancing on the street, and that brought me closer to making my own kind of experimental music. I went to India at the age of 16 and found my guru, my master, who I'm still studying with up to today. So studying Indian classical music, percussion, and composition. And you know, the times when I used to travel back from India to London, I used to just meet my normal, you know, day-to-day kind of friends, which I haven't seen for days. And they would fill me up on, you know, the new music which is happening on the street, which I missed out on at times. And then I would just get on it like straight away and then buy 12-inch records, electro pretty much, street sounds, which were a label based in Ealing, run by Morgan Khan, and he was kind of, you know, importing all this American music for us. And the label was called Street Sounds. So I was buying a lot of these compilations of like Chicago house music and Detroit house and electro, and quite fascinated by these drum machines, which was kind of making, I suppose, you know, dance music. It was very, very interesting times. My first musical kind of production happened with a ghetto blaster. So, you know, thanks to my father, I had all of these gadgets which were available to me. So I had this small ghetto blaster which had a red button, and that was record. So I discovered that, okay, if I put an electro cassette on and then have another ghetto blaster, because I had probably had two, which I did, luckily. The other one also had a red button, or maybe it didn't. Maybe one of them had a play button and the other one had a play and record button. So I would play the electro track from one ghetto blaster and then accompany that electro beat with my Indian drums with a tabla, and then press record on the other ghetto blaster too. And then I'll find I have a cassette recording of a track which was really completely unique, which was electro track with featuring myself on it. And then I would play that and then do something else. Maybe play like, put some lentils in like a jar and play a shaker. And I would just build up this track, track after track, and I would find that the sound quality, the sonic quality had quite deteriorated by the end of like 4 to 5 transfers. But I would have a unique piece of music, which actually felt so amazing. You know, it was like my album on a cassette, and I was doing this at the age of 13, 14 years old. I think they're lying around. I think recently my mum had given me a cassette like 3 weeks ago and said, I think you should listen to this. And in the car, actually, I still keep a cassette recorder because of that. So I'm listening to stuff, and stuff does appear, but I haven't heard any of the early recordings, but hopefully they will just show up. The relationship between my teacher, my guru, and myself has been so special, because, you know, one of the things he had realized is that that I have an experimental, innovative side in me, and yet I want to learn traditional classical music. So what he did was, it was quite clever, because he knew exactly the prescription to give me. And he would always say, well, I'm not going to give you these flashy compositions which you've heard on, like, you know, Ravi Shankar records. You know, I'm going to give you the principal fundamental compositions, which are very, very important, and on a fundamental level, and also on a aesthetic level. And if you learn these correctly and practice them over time, take your time, don't practice too hard right now, because my fingers, I was always very quick, fast, speedy player, you know, being from London. I played things like really fast, and, you know, plus, I studied snare drum when I was a kid too in school, so you know, playing Richard's romp and marching snare drum. you know, when I played Indian drums, I used to play those roll type of buzz rolls really fast, and he was always trying to slow me down. And he said, look, if you listen to what I'm saying and just do that, that composition I'm going to give you, I promise you that you will able to create so many new compositions out of that one composition. So don't worry about all the rest of the flashy chops and what everybody's playing. When I would go in the studio and do the session, you know, I would give everything I have for the song, and then once it was done, I would hang out in the control room. I would hang out with the producers and the engineers, and I always asked them questions. I used to be there for 2-3 hours, maybe possibly waiting for a taxi. You know, you had limos those days. You know, if you did a session, you know, you got well looked after, and so I would wait for my car and just hang out in the control room, and I would ask questions to the engineers. That what does that do? What, you know, that knob over there, what's that for? And how did you make my instrument sound so good? And I remember people like, the first time I'd met Mike Stent, Spike. We were doing a session, and I think I played Latin percussion congas on a track, and then I came in the control room and it sounded amazing, and I said, look, how did you get that sound? And he said, oh, it's just loads of presence, like loads of treble, you know, like 10K or 12K or whatever. So all of these things had sunk in me. So my kind of sonic and production and engineering skills actually, you know, came to me as a gift from actually a service I was doing, which was, you know, a percussionist, a session musician.